After 8 long years, Metroid Prime 4 is finally almost here, and the hype is unreal. So before it drops, I want to look back and rank every single Metroid game. This series just has so many great games, which makes this list insanely tough. I know most of you are probably going to disagree with this, but remember, this is solely based on how much I personally like each game and nothing else. And if you haven't played some of these yet, stick around because I might just convince you to jump into some of these before Prime 4 comes out. Starting off at number 14, we have Metroid Prime Pinball. Some of you who are younger may not even know this exists, and I honestly don't blame you because I never see this game talked about. In the early to mid 2000s, Nintendo was just obsessed with making pinball games with their popular characters like Mario, used to be addicted to this game, Pokemon Pinball, and of course Metroid Prime Pinball. It is literally exactly what it sounds like. You just use a morph ball as a pinball on Metroid Prime themed stages, and it's fun if you like pinball and has a lot of fan service and fun ideas, but novelty only carries a game so far. While the tables are lovingly built, the experience is inherently limited just by the genre. Like, this is a series known for grand adventures, and then you just have this. And I think that's why Prime Pinball sits at the bottom for me. Like, it's enjoyable, it's not a bad game, but it's just a simple time waster. I'm glad it exists, it's kind of funny that it exists. This is one of the few games in the series that doesn't take itself seriously. But when we talk about the games that define this franchise, like, it gets really hard to rank this any higher. And at number 13, we have Metroid Prime Federation Force. So this released at a really bad time. Fans were desperate for the next real Metroid game, especially anything connected to Prime, and instead we got a co-op shooter on the 3DS where you play as Chibi Federation troopers. Oh yeah, and we got Blast Ball 2, which is like a discount Rocket League, even though I think this actually came out around the same time as Rocket League. Even if you try to judge it on its own terms instead of just judging it based on the reactions, it just really is not very good. The art style strips away any atmosphere. What should be industrial mech suits and cold alien environments end up looking like plastic toys walking through empty sets. The worlds don't feel lived in or mysterious, it's like it's just built for objectives. And mission design relies heavily on having a full squad. Like, solo play is slow and tedious because enemy health and encounter pacing assume multiple players. Even with others, combat feels stiff and basic, it just never lets you improvise. The biggest problem is that nothing here really feels like a Metroid. No sense of isolation, discovery, and the rare moments when Samus actually appears it doesn't even make the game better. It's just a directionless game that released at an awful time, like I said, and doesn't really have anything going for it. Like, do I think this is a better game than maybe something like a Metroid Pinball? Yeah, because, I mean, this is, I guess, a fuller game, but it's just really not a game I'd really ever want to go back to. Like, Blast Ball was the best part of this. Before we move on, this video is sponsored by Southern New Hampshire University, or SNHU for short. If you've ever felt stuck in a job that doesn't fit what you want, kind of like how Federation Force lost its direction, it might be time to level up your own path. SNHU is a non-profit, accredited university with over 200 flexible online degree programs, including game development, psychology, and cybersecurity. There's no set class time, so you can learn on your schedule, and you can transfer up to 90 credits towards your bachelor's. Their tuition rates are among the lowest in the nation, and you'll get free 24/7 online tutoring to help you prepare for the job market. Go to snhu.edu/game domain, or click the link below to learn how you can get started with a game development degree today. Thanks to SNHU for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the ranking. At number 12, we have Metroid 2. It's one of those games that was just severely limited by its hardware. Kind of game where the idea of it lands more than the actual gameplay. On modern hardware with save states and backlights, you can appreciate the structure even if it obviously was very basic. But on original Game Boy hardware, this was like spelunking with a dying flashlight. The most distinct thing about the Return of Samus is how it feels, but that doesn't automatically make it fun. The loneliness, the descent, the sense that SR388 is actively rejecting you, like that part works perfectly in the game, but the problem is the Game Boy just couldn't support the idea very well. The environments blur together, not because it's clever or atmospheric, but because everything looks the same. Like, there's only so much they could do on the Game Boy. The evolving Metroid forms are really cool, especially in concept, and it is one thing that the game does really great, but even there, the fights are just repetitive. Like, it feels like you're fighting the same enemy again and again, just with slight tweaks each time. As an actual play experience, time has not done this any favors. There's no map, no visual landmarks, and the pacing is just a grind. Navigation isn't skill-based, it's just like remembering which identical screen you come from and hope you don't miss a tunnel. I would not recommend this as anyone's starting point, and honestly, I really wouldn't recommend playing it at all unless you're actively trying to play every Metroid game. I can respect this game for what it sets up, but if I want to play Metroid 2, I'm just not going to play this version. Like, either play Samus Returns on the 3DS or another Metroid 2 remake, because those games actually take the concept of this and make it actually good. And again, that's not to say that this game is like awful or anything, it's just too limited by its hardware and it really brings it down. Number 11, we have the game that started it all, and a lot of the criticisms I have with Metroid 2 I still have here, but this is better hardware than the Game Boy. It still isn't saying much though. Replaying it today requires a special kind of patience that just does not come naturally for most people. The repeated room tiles are confusing. It's like the game is just trying to get you lost. I played this after I got into the series through Prime and Samus Returns, and it was just really frustrating. It's an NES game, so it's very light on features, and it's often just not clear where you're supposed to go next or what's actually a dead end. And I think there was a map or something with this that came with the original NES version. I could be wrong, but this game came out way before I was born. I played this on modern hardware. Dying and respawning with almost no energy left is cruel. Mission management is clumsy, and combat feels like wrestling underwater compared to how fluid Samus eventually becomes in later games. But even with all that, the one thing I can say about the original Metroid is that its tone was really amazing for the time and still not bad by today's standards at all. You really do feel isolated, and that's kind of what Metroid is supposed to be. I just really can't put this game any higher because I wasn't a big fan of it personally. Maybe things would be different if I was around when it came out, but I just think that the Metroid series has progressed so far past this point. In number 10, we have one that I know is probably going to stir up a lot of controversy in the comments with Other M. It's a game that feels like it almost works, but it doesn't really work. The core combat system, the dodge into auto-aim counter shot, actually feels decent. When a fight is flowing properly, Samus moves quickly and responsively. Enemies telegraph attacks in ways that reward timing, and landing those dodge shots actually feels satisfying. If the whole game leaned into the style of fast, aggressive, close-range combat, it could have been a pretty good game. The problem is that the game just constantly interrupts itself. The force switch into first-person aiming isn't smooth. It stops the fight dead while you stand in place like a turret, just hoping you don't get hit. It's like the game wants to be a third-person action game and a Prime-style game at the same time, and neither system supports the other. It just feels really repetitive after a while. And then there's the level design. The environments are technically varied, there's a desert, jungle sector, but they just feel flat. Rooms often feel like they exist for the encounter design and not as spaces that would actually exist in the universe. There's no real atmospheric buildup or any sense of discovery. Bosses are a mixed bag. Some are great, like the Queen Metroid fight, but others just rely on gimmicks and just waiting. Also, we gotta talk about the story a little bit because it's just really weird here. There's the authorization system, which just pretty much destroyed Samus's character in this game. It made absolutely no sense. Other M has ideas, some of them good, some of them not good, but the execution is just so messy, repetitive, and just way too stop and go to ever feel smooth. In recent years, I've seen a lot of people come to support this game. And listen, if you like this game, I'm not here to argue with you and tell you the game sucks. This is just how I personally feel about it. I didn't think it was that good of a game. I also haven't played it in a very long time, so maybe if I go back to it, I'll change my mind. But I hope you can understand why I have it low on this list. Number 9, we have Metroid Prime Hunters. It tries to be a full shooter on handheld, and in some ways it actually pulls that off. The stylus aiming is bizarre at first, but once you adjust, it's fairly snappy and accurate. In terms of pure aiming precision, it might actually control better than dual-stick shooters from the same era. Movement is quick, and swapping weapons works well, but the campaign suffers because the level design just isn't built like a Metroid game. Every area feels like an arena or a hallway leading to an arena. It feels like there's no sense of mystery or exploring a planet. There's no distinct landmarks, texture, or environmental storytelling. Just kind of feels like multiplayer maps converted into missions. Enemy encounters don't really evolve. Most enemies either rush you or just stand still and shoot. You figure out how to handle them early, and the game doesn't build any meaningful variations. And then the bosses repeat a lot. So instead of adapting to new patterns, you just end up grinding the same handful of encounter types over and over again. Now, the bounty hunter rivals are the most interesting part. Each rival is basically a different playstyle and weapon gimmick, and learning how to counter them is the closest the game gets to strategy. But without online play, those encounters don't have the mind game aspect that made them special. They're just kind of mid-tier bosses in rooms that look like every other room. I never actually got to play the online mode, and this was an early DS game, so it could have only been so good anyway. I don't hate the concept, and I think on Switch 2 there could be an actually good online Metroid game, but this game was just trying to do too much on just very limited hardware. At number 8, we have Metroid Samus Returns, and from this point on, I think all these games are great. I think the top 8 are fantastic games, so this is really where it became difficult to rank these. I even think if I replay some of these games, things might even change, but for now I have Samus Returns at 8, and it kind of hurts to do so because this is the first 2D Metroid I really got into. The movement is tighter and far more deliberate than the older games. The aiming is full 360 control instead of fixed angles, and it makes the combat flow just so much smoother. Then there's also the counter move, which is very interesting. However, that being said, the counter system can also make combat repetitive. Many enemies are designed specifically to be countered, to the point where the games expect you to counter constantly. In short sessions, it feels great, but in long stretches, you start to feel like you're doing the same action over and over just to move forward. It's satisfying, but it becomes a rhythm that's just too predictable. The map design is solid, but very segmented. Like, you unlock one area, clear out Metroids, move to the next area, repeat. The loop is structured, which makes progression clear, but that structure also makes the game feel linear compared to something like Super or Dread. You don't really route the world, you just follow it. The Aeon abilities are mixed. Scan Pulse is extremely helpful for learning how 2D Metroid maps are built, especially if this is your first time really playing this type of game. But it also removes a lot of discovery because it instantly highlights breakable walls and hidden paths. It's good training wheels, but once the training wheels come off, you kind of notice how much the game expected you to use them. Where Samus Returns shines is in the last quarter. Enemy variety improves, the Metroid fights finally start evolving in meaningful ways, and the tension ramps up. The final battles and ending sequence hit hard, and you feel a mission reach its conclusion. Of course, this is a remake of Metroid 2, so some of the fundamental issues come back, but this is just so far beyond.
Say that again?
The original version. Number 7, we have Metroid Prime 3, and I think it's a great game, but I do think it's the weakest of the trilogy. It mostly comes down to how it shifts the series' priorities, like where Prime 1 and 2 trap you inside a single world and let mystery build slowly. Corruption spreads the experience across multiple planets, NPCs, and more mission-focused objectives. Like, instead of more environmental storytelling, like uncovering what happened, you're more told what's going on. I know I might get a lot of hate for this, but the Wii pointer controls are actually something I really liked in Corruption. Aiming is fast and precise, and it gives combat a fluid motion that the first two games never had. The grapple lasso is also one of the smartest additions. It just makes the game so much more satisfying. Boss fights also lean into this more direct style of combat. Hyper mode in theory adds tension by tempting you with power that can kill you if you overuse it, but in practice it turns a lot of fights into go into hyper mode and unload. You're still making decisions, but the game expects hyper mode so often that it sometimes just flattens the challenge rather than make it more difficult. Where Corruption drops off compared to the first two is in exploration and atmosphere. The planets are cool individually, but they don't feel like one interconnected world you grow to understand. You're completing objectives more than charting your own path. The constant radio chatter and NPC interaction also breaks some of that quiet isolation Prime just does so well. It's not that it's not atmospheric, it's just like a different kind of atmosphere, if that makes sense. Like, it's less focused on mystery. And while the game still feels like a really great finale to this trilogy, it doesn't stick in my mind the way that Talon 4 or Aether do. I like Corruption a lot, and I really do hope it comes to Switch or Switch 2 because, like I said, it's still a fantastic game, but I definitely prefer quite a few Metroid games over it and the first two Metroid Prime games. Number 6, we have Metroid Fusion, and this is a different kind of Metroid. Instead of wandering through a giant world and slowly putting the pieces together, Fusion pushes you through a sequence of challenges with a very clear sense of direction. The navigation rooms straight up tell you where to go, and for most of the story, you follow instructions. That sounds restrictive. I know I've talked about this a little bit in the video for other games, but it's not a flaw so much as a different design goal here. Fusion wants more tension rather than just complete freedom. And for some games, I think that's a flaw, like if that's not what they're intentionally trying to do. But here, I actually really enjoyed it. The moment-to-moment gameplay is great. Samus moves faster than Super. The movement just feels so much better. Bosses are a highlight. Like, there's Saris, Yakuza, Ridley X, Nightmare. This legitimately has like some of the best boss fights in the entire series. The SAX sections are smartly handled, not because they're scary jump scare moments, but because they make think about your options. Like, this is something that we've seen in a lot of games, like Resident Evil has had something like this, where like when you see a certain enemy, you can't actually beat it, so you just have to retreat. The game doesn't overuse these encounters either, so when it happens, like your brain immediately shifts into how to escape. That gives this kind of a survival horror pacing the other 2D entries don't have. So I really love Fusion, but going back to something I said wasn't really a flaw, with the exploration freedom, like you don't get to choose your route for most of the game. Like, the world is designed in a very specific way. I prefer the more open style from other Metroid games. So I can appreciate this on its own, but I can still prefer something else because I know someone's probably going to say I'm being hypocritical about that. Still a really fantastic game, and I highly recommend this because this is a game a lot of people just haven't played. Now we go into my top 5, and we're going to start with Zero Mission. If someone is new to 2D Metroid, this is probably the one I'd tell them to start with. The movement is smooth, quick, and a little more forgiving. The game's progression is paced almost perfectly, and every item solves a problem you just encountered, and then every new area feels like an extension of what you already know. And remember, this is a remake of the original Metroid, but it just does so much more. Like it completely overhauls the original. Combat is simple but clean, boss fights are readable and fair. Kraid, Ridley, Mecha Ridley, all are about learning patterns rather than just simply reacting. The game also doesn't inflate enemy health or slow down the pace just to pad playtime. Like, that can be an issue in a lot of Metroidvanias where it just feels like it starts to drag on and they just give some enemies way too much health to the point that it just gets frustrating. Like, I don't feel like this game has much of that at all. And then we gotta talk about the stealth section. Losing the suit changes how you play without changing the core mechanics. Like, you're still doing the same things, but you just aren't able to brute force anything. Like, these aren't these massive sections of the game, but it does change how the game feels. Like, I really love this game, and I love when developers do something like like this where they take an old game or a game that may not be the greatest now and just completely revamp it, because the original still had a lot going for it, but it was just too limited, just like with Metroid 2 what that did. So why is it at number 5? Like, I think this is a game that has pretty few flaws, but it is very streamlined. Like, almost every room is designed to be understood quickly. Compared to something like Super or Dread, I just prefer the style of those games more. I think this has less replay value, but for what it is, I really love Metroid Zero Mission. Like, this is one that you should try out even if you're not a big Metroid fan, because I think this could definitely ease you into the series. For number 4, I have Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. So this is probably the most demanding game in the Prime trilogy. The Dark Aether health drain, the beam ammo system, and the save zones are all mechanics that force you to think before moving. On your first playthrough, this can feel punishing, but once you learn how the game wants you to approach rooms and plan routes, it becomes one of the most rewarding gameplay loops in the series. Traversal is more strategic than in Prime 1, like you're constantly managing position and timing during Dark World segments, and map layouts are built around playing smart, not just moving efficiently. When you go to Sanctuary Fortress, the game essentially turns into a kind of a puzzle box, like the magnet rails, moving platforms, multi-layer arenas, especially once you get towards the end of the game, like it just gets so creative. Boss fights here are more technical and in my opinion some of the best in the series. There's Boost Guardian, Spider Guardian, Quadraxis, and it really fully utilizes like the 3D structure here. After Prime really started the series off, it feels like they were able to experiment a little more with this game being 3D, but there are definitely flaws in this game. Pacing is the main one. Like, Echoes ask patience from the player, especially with the late game Sky Temple key hunt, and that can slow momentum pretty hard if you're not already tracking item hints. Some enemies are too tanky early on before beam upgrades, and Dark World traversal can feel slow until you really get used to it, but the highs of Echoes are just extremely high, like especially in Sanctuary. So while I think some games that I have lower than this have less flaws, I just feel like the highs of this game carry Metroid Prime 2 to number 4 on this list for me. And at number 3, this one is going to stir up a lot of controversy. This is, for most people, going to be 1 or 2, and of course it's Super Metroid. So before you comment, let me just explain. So this is one of the most important pieces of game design like ever released, even today. There's no tutorials, no objective markers, no dialogue telling you where to go. The world itself teaches you, and the level design leads your eyes like before your movement. Like, it's just a masterclass of game design, and while this didn't start the Metroidvania genre, obviously its predecessor did, I feel like this is really where Metroidvanias were really fleshed out. Like, it showed how great this genre could be. So movement in Super is slower than some of the newer games, but that doesn't make it bad. I really do like how it just doesn't even teach you the moves, like you just like learn as you go on. And then there's the atmosphere, because this may have the best atmosphere in a 2D Metroid game, and that's really impressive considering this is on 16-bit hardware. Like, Zebus doesn't feel like it was made for Samus to explore. It feels more like a place that already existed before she arrived. The music is great in the background, rooms are just designed perfectly here, and it's not like a set piece. The combat feels smooth here, the pacing is great, but the reason it sits at number 3 instead of 2 or 1 just comes down to the feel of it. Like, once you've played newer entries, like especially Dread, going back to Super requires a lot of recalibrating, like the slow acceleration, the stiffness of aiming on a single axis, and the occasionally big map progression does take adjustment. It's not worse necessarily, but as someone who also didn't grow up during this time, it doesn't immediately click. Like, it definitely feels a little bit dated, but foundationally this game is just nearly flawless. Like, I think the only flaws for me are more like gameplay quirks, like things I mentioned. And I totally understand having this top 2. And for me, it nearly was, but I think I just preferred the top 2 games more. Number 2, I have Dread, and before you say recency bias, this isn't even the most recent Metroid I've played. Like, I've played other games on this list after playing Dread, but I just feel like this is just peak 2D Metroid. Everything about this just takes place of the modern hardware. Like, think about it. Before this game, the last 2D Metroid we got was in 2017 on the 3DS, so very outdated hardware. Here, Samus just moves perfectly. Like, inputs are tight, animations feel tuned for responsiveness, and obviously being a Metroidvania, like the sliding, flash shifting, wall jumping, quick ledge transitions, like, this whole moveset just feels perfect here. Like, it feels like you're just keeping momentum as you go. Like, it never feels like it's slow. The enemy zones define the tone of the game. They're not horror set pieces, but do definitely make you feel pressure. The tiny counter window that feels impossible at first, like, isn't cheap difficulty. It forces you to stop relying on panic and instead move with more intent. When you learn how to read these encounters rather than just reacting to them, the game gets a lot better, in my opinion, quite a bit easier. And then I've talked about bosses in other games, but they're once again just fantastic in Dread. Experiment number Z57, SQ, Kraid, Ravenbeak. These fights just test whether you can stay like locked in. Map design is more structured than Super, but it's extremely cohesive. Every shortcut that opens up feels intentional, and the game keeps the fast pace by reducing dead time. Just very little wandering just for the sake of padding. Where Dread falls slightly short of number 1 is an atmosphere variety. Areas can blend together visually, and the soundtrack doesn't hit quite the same iconic tones as earlier entries, but I still think it's really good here. but in terms of pure just playability, Dread is the most satisfying 2D Metroid. It takes the things super built, pacing lessons, Zero Mission refined, and the tension fusion introduced, and just merges them into like the ultimate 2D Metroid. Besides Zero Mission, if I had to recommend just one 2D Metroid to someone who hasn't played Metroid before, it would be this, just because it is more accessible, obviously being on the Switch, and where some of the older Metroid games might be difficult for someone who didn't grow up during that era to really get into. This game only came out a couple years ago, and I think that if you're even slightly interested in Metroidvania games, that you should give this a try. And now at number 1, maybe seen as the popular pick, but I'm going with Metroid Prime, specifically the remastered version, because it's literally just a better version of the original. It just feels like Metroid at its most complete, like visually, mechanically, atmospherically, structurally. This is the game that brought Metroid into 3D and into first person. There's just so many new things this game did, and the scan visor is one of the greatest mechanics in any Metroid game because it shifts storytelling from narration to more context. You learn what happened by noticing what was left behind, like the architecture, experiments, carvings, abandoned data terminals. Movement is deliberate, but it never feels sluggish. Combat is about controlling distance, prioritizing targets, and managing beams and visors. Boss fights are structured around understanding patterns. Like, there's just so many great ones here, and each one kind of teaches something new. The world layout is nearly perfect too, like areas loop back into each other in ways that make the planet feel whole, like Chozo ruins into Magmore, into Fendrana, into mines, and back. The game rewards memory and just understanding where you are, and then the remaster elevates the visuals and has some quality of life updates. Many people consider this to be one of the greatest games of all time. Some people even have it as the greatest game of all time, and it's for good reasons. Just a masterclass in game development. Like, every single thing this game does, it does pretty much perfectly. Like, I really like the other Metroid Prime games, but I feel like the atmosphere here is just the best. And I'm really glad this game was remastered for Switch, because while it did so well for a Metroid game, there's still a lot of people who couldn't play it, and it's not a very accessible game since you weren't able to play it on Switch until the remaster came out. So hopefully more Metroid games get this treatment. And anyway, that's the list. Like I said, this is based on just how much I enjoyed each game. Like, you could say my list is wrong all you want. I'm not making this list to appease fans of any game. It's just simply what I think, and I want to know your opinions in the comments. I know I haven't made other Metroid videos, but it is a series I really do like, so if this video does well, I'll probably make some more, so if you have any ideas for Metroid content you'd like to see, then be sure to like and subscribe, and check out my other content. Thank you for watching Domainy, and I'll see you next time.